Welcome, everyone. I'm Robin Grabfelder, and thank you for joining us on EA Zoom today for the second panel to discuss the 2024 mid-year astrology update. We're going to explore the significant astrological events and transits that will shape the rest of this year. And we're honored to have a panel of esteemed astrologers who will share their expertise and perspectives. We will have Ari Moshe, Kim Marie Weimer, Daniel Fiverson, Ryan Evans, Michaela Villiers-Kendall, and Sue Hillyard. Kim Marie, would you like to start?
I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, as we had talked on our pre-call, for him to give us another introduction. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, you bet. Well, thanks everyone for being here and viewing this in not real time, if that happens to be the case. But regardless, just like to offer an opportunity for us all to surround this circle with love and light and come into our hearts, feel our feet on the ground, and stretch our consciousness from our hearts up into the solar system, greater universe, and all the cycles and rhythms therein. And then bring those back down into our heart, down into the ground, back to the heart. And it's from there that we, as astrologers, wish to convey this sacred information. This is an honor for us all to be here in this capacity, where we can observe the cycles and rhythms of nature and describe and delineate that for the rest of us, offering some pathways to greater happiness or healing or hope or resolution or whatever the case may be. So that's the capacity that we're in today. So with that, let her rip, guys.
All right, everyone, I'm going to share my screen. Perhaps those of you who are attending this live recognized all the news that broke here in the last hour. And so I have a couple of slides that I would just like to share with you that are germane to the news that just broke, which is the fact that President Biden decided to end his re-election campaign and he endorsed Kamala Harris. And if you're not aware of this, Biden has his moon in Taurus, about 1 degree. And we have Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, about 1 degree. And in the midst of this week here, Pluto has been making its second of 3 last quarter squares to Biden's natal moon. And so here's Pluto in retrograde, or Pluto in Aquarius, one more time, shaking things up for everybody, personally, collectively, in whatever way, but probably no one more than Biden. And so I just want to say, probably as many are right now, that we appreciate everything he has done for our country in helping us keep democracy moving forward, especially as we have been going through our USA Pluto return, which has recently happened as well. And so as a collective in the United States, we are in process of rebirthing ourselves. And how are we going to do that? I put this slide up that you see in January, when I personally thought that it would probably be a race between 2 older gentlemen. That is no longer the case. However, I think the points that I want to make right here are still relevant. Between 2016 and 2024, the first time Donald Trump was elected, we have gained 52 million younger voters. And guess what? They are all the Pluto and Sag generation, or what society calls the Gen Z voters. During that 8-year time period, we have also lost 20 million of our senior voters who have passed back on to spirit world. That is a huge difference between the first time Donald Trump ran for office and running this time. However, what we also find here in our United States is all of our July 4th, 1776 charts show There's two squares in opposition, T-square if you want to include Chiron. It shows the energy of the US in our first 240 some years of having inclusive, exclusive trends and going back and forth and back and forth. Right now, you have to have your head in the sand to realize the split that's going on in this country. And what is creating is the fact that there are only a few states that really have a presidential election contest. You see them listed on your screen right now. And you see then the states, they're not listed, but the entrenchment between states that are more or less Republican and states that are more or less Democrat. Where that comes from is our Constitution and its electoral college. I'm going to show you these battleground states in just another slide, but just in case we have an international listener or someone who is new to politics, maybe some younger people looking at voting. In the United States, we have 538 electoral votes, and they're based upon our 100 senators and our 400 some Congress people, and there might be one or two electoral votes for the District of Columbia, if I'm correct. How those are apportioned changes every 10 years with our US consensus or census count, which is why it's so important that we count everybody in this country. What happens is we don't have a direct democracy. It's not one person, one vote. For most of the states, whoever wins that popularity contest, their electoral votes go entirely to whoever that presidential candidate is. If you look at this, you can see that it makes a small state. I come from the Northern Plains. I'm next door to Wyoming and South Dakota. We have almost 900,000 people in my state. However, we have a lot more influence, let's say, than California, and it's 55 electoral votes. This might be part of what changes as we move through Pluto and Aquarius over the next 20 years, because the last time we had Pluto and Aquarius, we had the Bill of Rights, which were the first 10 amendments to our Constitution. And as a country, we're probably ripe for some of that to happen. I don't know that it's going to happen in 2024, but stay tuned as Pluto gains some steam in Aquarius, and we see how our presidential election turns out this fall. This is a slide from yesterday. If you don't know who 538.com is, it was a polling organization created by a gentleman called Nate Silver, and he has become the premier polling company organization in the United States, and he aggravates, is that the word, and averages all kinds of polls. If you take a moment, these are the top 7 battleground states, and this is showing where Trump was July 20, 2020, and where he was yesterday. This came out yesterday in the Washington Post, and when I saw that, it just further solidified the fact that because of the electoral college and how it works, whoever a Democratic candidate is, they can't win 50% plus 1 of the vote. They have to win the vote, popular vote, okay, by about 5-6% to even be able to get enough electoral votes to then win. Previous screen. It happened twice recently where Gore had more votes than Bush and Clinton had more Bush votes than Trump, but the Electoral College still didn't go in their favor, even though the Supreme Court decided the 2001. So again, I saw this yesterday and I thought, oh my gosh, wow, there's no way I can see Biden staying in the race. And so guess what happened? Stay tuned. There will be others that will have some comments as we move forward. The final thing that I want to say for everyone, and I do have Kamala Harris's chart, which I can bring up at some point if we need it. But I just want to remind everyone that after this US presidential election on November 5th, we are going to have Jupiter still retrograde in Gemini all over Donald Trump's chart. And by the way, on Kamala Harris's chart as well. But right after the election, we're going to have a Mercury retrograde in Sag, November 25th through December 15th, 23 to 6 degrees Sag. So after this presidential election, Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, Mercury retrograde in Sag, mutual reception with each other, doing retrogrades. I'm going to say that we're probably going to have plenty of chaos after this election, regardless who pulls it off. And whoever does win, it's probably still going to be a fairly close election, and it will probably be a lot like it was in 2020 and early 21. So that was just my few salient points. I'll interject with a couple of aspects with some of our other speakers or when our panel is talking later on. And so at this point, Sue, can you stop showing my screen and I will turn it over to whoever else would like to speak up.
Very informative. Very good.
Do you have a chart for the election, or does anyone happen to have a chart for the election?
I do, yes.
That would be interesting to see.
Do you want to see it right now or
Is that
later?
possible? It's just it feels to me like the last thing you were saying about Jupiter.
Sure. Here's what I have a tendency to do. And so again, I think I can do this. Hold on. I'm hoping you can see this well enough. Please let me know if you can't. Here's what I have a tendency to do. There, whoops, nope, it didn't do it. Okay, so I'm gonna go like this. Forgive me, everybody. I'm gonna just go through. I put a bunch of slides together depending on what questions or comments came up to, there, here's the one. I have a tendency to draw a chart for when the polls open, and I always put them to Washington, D.C. In D.C., they open up at 7 a.m. And then I do another one for when the polls close, and I do Washington, D.C., 7 p.m. Obviously, Hawaii and everybody else has different dates, okay? But this is what I've looked at the presidential elections the last few times. So we can see that we have Neptune in a T-square with Jupiter retrograde and Venus moon when the polls open. What I found interesting is by the time the polls close on your blue, the blue T-square here, moon's moved into Capricorn and is squaring the nodes. And they were very strong in Donald Trump's chart and in Joe Biden's chart. And when I saw the polls closing in Gemini, I went, oh dear, that might be Donald Trump. But then I went back to the polls closing November 3rd of 2020. We had the same Gemini rising with moon north node in that first house. And this is when Joe Biden won over Donald Trump. So those are just the slides that I show up if anybody else wants to make a comment on them.
I just can't help but, and forgive me, that's so unlike me, but I can't help but spin this darkly and see the T-square with Neptune and just be like, I don't trust either of them. I don't trust anybody.
The politicians.
Oh, God. What's the answer? I mean, discuss, you know.
No matter where they come from, who they are, they're politicians. Yep.
The thing that I
Tim
noticed.
Marie, Tim Marie, do you see the Star of David in the polls open election chart?
Sure.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, it's quite rare. And you know, again, like any other major configuration, it can work, you know, multiple ways. But it's an integration of everything that's going on. That chart is very unified in its expression. There's not much wiggle room for, you know, different options. It's going to go one way or the other, pretty much, because it's like locked and loaded. You know, I think that locked and loaded, I think, is more of a Grand Cross kind of expression, but it's got that same energy in it. And these are trines. The trines, the difference between the squares and the trines obviously is the squares have to happen, the trines don't have to happen. But when they're all got these sextiles that are pulling them all together, except for this one last leg up here, it professes to be something different, something and different again. Difference, good and bad. It's yin and yang. It goes, it wiggles in both ways. But I think it's important to note this. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to mean. I haven't spent enough time looking at it because I was working on what I was working on, but it did come up. I've had it here on my desk for a while, just kind of like meditating on it and
Will
wondering.
you clarify
what
for everyone
exactly.
who may not know what Star of David pattern you're referring to? Daniel, which Star of David pattern? For those that just don't know what that is.
Well, a Star of David is two trines, two grand trines that are interlinked. And this is an almost Star of David because each of the angles of the trines are joined by sextiles. So generally it's a hexagon. No, I guess it's it's a hexagon. It's a six-sided figure bounded by sextiles, but the core of it are the two trines that interlink. This involves the nodes, Uranus and Pluto as one of the trines, and the second trine is Mars, Mercury, and the other lunar node, the North Node. So, obviously there's an element of fate here. There's an element of, personal expression and need to express somebody expressing themselves in their own very unique way without regard to what anybody else may think, especially Mars and Leo. We've got Mercury, so ideas and beliefs and opinions are floating through it. And it's Uranus, which is the wild card. So it's I don't like to make predictions, but I think it's something to watch as we get closer, because some of these angles will be transited, especially the outer planet Uranus to the nodes and to Pluto are really going to linger over months. So it's something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Something that I noticed that I think is just worth speaking to in general regarding the transits that are just kind of essence for the second half of this year. Mars during this election is at a very pivotal point. So it's not just Mars entering into a full phase with Pluto, right? Just after the opposition. This is Mars just before retrograde. So Mars is soon going to go retrograde and will actually square Pluto, oppose Pluto twice more over the next several months. So this particular Mars has a lot of energy, and I want to take a moment to unpack that. And I'm not just going to speak about this election chart. I think this is something to appreciate around the last few months of this year. Right now, as we make this video, Mars is in Gemini. And what's interesting is after it moves through Gemini, it's going to go through Cancer, enter Leo, but then actually go back to, I think, 17 degrees Cancer. It won't actually enter Leo decisively until like a few months into 2025. So the phase that we're in right now is this sort of Mars. I mean, right now, Mars and Gemini, it's incredibly intellectually stimulating. There's a lot of new data and information. It's going to only get more interesting as Mars continues to trine Pluto, trine the South Node. Later on this month, it'll square Jupiter, join Jupiter, square Saturn, square Neptune. But this is like all this essential gathering of perspective and data, like a really interesting book that we're all reading, and things keep on changing. The plot twists are quite enthralling. But it's moving us to this very potent evolutionary phase. Like that opposition with Pluto itself, just without the retrograde, is a point of high tension, right? We're challenged and we're confronted with the deeper psychological content. How do I get out of this? How do I make new choices? How do I evolve? How do I empower myself? How do I continue to be a leader of my own soul growth. And this happening personally and collectively in the context of this retrograde cycle moving from Leo to Cancer, moving back and forth over Pluto on that transition from Capricorn to Aquarius. I mean, this just speaks so, there's so much in this. So maybe I'll just stop for now in just introducing this and see if there's more that anyone wants to add to Mars relative to this election date and just in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I noticed it because every time Trump is well, when he was elected the first time in 2016, and then even at the insurrection, and there was another time as well. Well, every time it seems there has been Mars at 0 degrees, or once I think it was Pluto, but at 0 degrees fixed signs, Taurus or Leo, every single time. And it was spot on at the 2016 election. It was actually went dead on 0 degrees Taurus, I think it was then, but it was fixed. And that was when he was declared the winner. And then at the insurrection, it happened again. It went into Taurus again that time. This time it's Leo. And I began to wonder, yeah, maybe we could look at Trump's chart. Sue, have you got that there? And because it was really interesting. Because I was trying to figure out, well, why is that? Because he's got like a couple of midpoints. It's at around early degrees of fix, but nothing major. So why is this? I mean, obviously in the US chart, the nodal axis is in fixed, you know, it's in Aquarius Leo. So that does make sense. But why Trump? So yeah, so I looked at the secondary secondary progressions, and then it sort of really leaked out at me. I don't know if you've got that there, the secondary.
I put a Donald Trump in a bi-wheel with the polls closing.
Yeah,
But I did list a few of the major solar arcs and secondary progression aspects that he's in the midst of.
Yeah. Sue, well, maybe it'll come up later, or I could maybe get it on my screen because it's really interesting. Once you put
Is there a chart that you gave to Sue?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sue, you want to pull that up?
Sure. Oh. So, I mean, I could try my screen, but I'm so hopeless. Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. So his secondary progressions, as you can see, he's got all that in the 12th in Leo. I mean, natally, of course, he's got Apophis, that is at 2 degrees 36 Leo, and it goes out to Pluto at 10 degrees. But you've got Saturn in his progressed chart at 3 degrees Leo, and that's really potent. And then you've also got Nessus up there at 9 degrees. Nessus, by the way, I'm gonna say something about the centaurs and Chiron, because particularly Nessus and Pholus are really well transited right now. Nessus is actually conjunct Saturn. I'll put that up later, and in Pisces, and Pholus is at the last degrees of Capricorn. So Pluto's gone back towards it. I don't want to go into the whole myth, but the centaurs and Chiron are all, you know, they're in the Kuiper belt and they're planetoids, and they're way out there actually in the realm of Pluto, in between the orbit of Saturn and Uranus. And so Saturn and Uranus have a lot to do with the centaurs. And I'll just show you quickly the book. I've brought this up in Astrospeak, but it's such a good little book. Chiron, Pholus, and Nessus at the Edge of and Beyond by Melanie Reinhardt. And I was actually at this, lecture in 96, she did it. And I'd forgotten I was at the lecture when I bought the book. So I found my questions in there. And it's bizarre. But anyway, that's really, really, I mean, it's packed full. And there was a particularly interesting thing she said here about the, okay, she says this about the, about Uranus and Saturn. Okay, Chiron conjunct Saturn, which isn't obviously now, but it will be in the future. Actually, I don't want to mention way ahead, but this period seems to look towards 2028 as a frame. And because there's a huge Saturn, Pluto, Chiron, Saturn and Chiron square to Pluto in fixed signs, about 6-7 Taurus, obviously Aquarius. So that, it seems like that is an impetus that's going towards that. So that's another reason Mars in fixed signs seems to be highlighted. But then of course, there's the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, at 0 degrees Aquarius, that happened in 2020 on the winter solstice, December 21st. And that, even Nostradamus, which I will wheel in Nostradamus. I mean, you know, people love it when he gets wheeled in. But he did mention in one of his quatrains about the renewal of the aqueduct, he called it. And he actually mentioned the transit of Jupiter conjunct Saturn in 2020. I mean, amazingly, that was back in 55 or something. So that he saw as the entryway to the age of Aquarius. So that, of course, and interestingly too, on the orbit, the precessional orbit, won't go into details, but Saturn and Jupiter and Saturn are seen as, you could call them tugboats. They actually do, by gravity, push the planets, which is weird, I know, and I'm going to do a talk about it because it's so strange. It's scientific. It's not just astrology, but obviously astrology is scientific. But so Saturn and Jupiter are seen as tugboats. So it's as though the ship of Aquarius is coming in, and they in 2020 at the winter solstice, which is so powerful, joined them. So obviously that kicked off this 0 degrees of Aquarius. So it's just things like that that make you think, sorry? It's things like that that make you think, okay, obviously Aquarius is the focal point as the big picture here. And so that's a possibility why it's so important. And America is the leading superpower of the world, has its nodal axis in Aquarius, Aquarius South Node and Leo North Node. So it's as though America as the leading superpower at this time, when the tugboats of Jupiter and Saturn have joined in 2020, and now we are being pushed into the age slowly, but here we go. And as we go, it's building and building. And so everything seems to be attuned to that. Later, if I get a chance, I'll put up the Israel chart, because that's very much to do with the whole thing. And Trump's chart, his secondary progress chart, does his Saturn at least, and up to his Pluto, obviously, in Leo, but his Saturn and his Apophis seem very much, but that's Saturn. I mean, I can only think, and obviously it's squaring the moon at this point on July 13th, which was the assassination attempt. So I just set it for then, but the moon is there in Scorpio, 5 degrees Scorpio. And that picks up a lot of stuff like Israel's chart and everything. So there's a lot of that Mars. It seems to be triggering and packing a punch for these fixed points, early fixed, that are to do ultimately with the big Aquarian picture. I thought so interesting. But I would say that, you know, he's been unstoppable every time that hit. And to me, that's enough to say there's nothing to stop him. I know everyone hates Most people, astrologers, we're all thinking people we we hate to hear that, most of us, but it's a matter of fate, destiny, and it is going to be a tumultuous next few years, and we can feel it. We know we're already bracing ourselves. We've had a few punches, but it's going to get rockier. But we are being primed, and we're being shown that, I think actually we're being shown that we have been traumatized, not just in the last century or so, since the First World War, world wars, and recently, but we've been traumatized for thousands of years. So, and trauma has been the way of life, and the powers that be have used that. But now we're becoming aware of it, and we're now becoming aware that this has been like MK Ultra, mind control, hypnosis, programming, mind programming. It's been the method, and trauma is the way it's induced. So you keep your people traumatized, you keep the masses traumatized. What's happening now, though, with Chiron, it's showing it up. You know, someone else can look at that. I'm sure you'll look at Chiron, because it's so incredible that it's actually conjunct the Chiron return. It's the Chiron return of the US chart. So and it's, you know, conjunct this North Node, Eris. And so it's sort of leading the way. It's but saying this is the wound. Well, what is the wound? It's power. It's a negative masculine principle that's been in power for so long, and we are becoming aware of our trauma now. But
Michaela, I want to take a note of something Christina wrote here. Just
Yeah.
noting, you know, the wound of slavery and the imprints of that, how strong that is right now. I was just researching, since you brought up Kimmery, the Electoral College, which, yeah, personally, I think the Electoral College is totally insane. And that was a really great graphic you shared, just highlighting that reality. Why was it created? So I just did a quick research. From what I gathered, superficially, it was created because in the South, when thousands of previously enslaved people were now eligible to vote, that would have, like, in certain states, 60% of the voting population were Black people. So that would have a huge impact if all of them had equal rights. So some kind of system was created that effectively had the effect of diminishing the popular vote, so that the weight of the increased Black population that could now vote wasn't as significant. That was its origins, apparently, as I just read it. I mean, I didn't research it thoroughly, but that's what that webpage just expressed to me on history.com. And I find that interesting because we think about just the Capricorn Aquarius transition that we're in right now. It's been an incentive for most political leaders not to change it, because the party generally that's up for re-election usually benefits from the Electoral College. So once you're in power, there's less of an incentive to do something that might diminish your power. But isn't that really what the higher teaching of Aquarius is relative to the shadow of Capricorn? Like, let's stop thinking about, you know, winning, or just the interest of political parties that are living within that construct and the precedents. The word I'm thinking is the moralities, the ethics, the standards of ethics and moralities that we've been conditioned to accept. Aquarius wants to think, well, what's best for everyone? And I know that our first president, George Washington, really warned against that kind of stuff, warned against people trying to hold the power. I think he chose to step down and not become the next king that will just, you know, rule indefinitely. So I think that's something that's really interesting. I do want to pivot us back to Mars, because I think that's a very important part of these transits for this year, and it would be worthwhile to just give some attention to it. So I wanted to see if anyone wants to speak specifically to Mars.
Sure.
I would like to come at this for a couple of minutes from a slightly different direction.
Sure, Daniel, maybe you, and then we can go to Ryan afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say something about Mars. In that chart that we looked at with the trines, we had Uranus is squaring Pluto. That's a hand grenade in a steel box. Mars is the trigger. So there's no question that it's highly inflammable. But Sue, if I can share my screen, I like to look at this from a more of a mundane astrology perspective rather than working with personalities and some of our personal feelings emerging, because I think that does have a tendency to get in the way.
You should be able to share your screen. Ari, did you want to continue with the discussion of, or Daniel, are you going to continue with the discussion of Mars, or are you going to
No,
pivot
you want
to-
to do Mars, and then you can come back to me.
Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
think
That's
yeah.
good.
Let's
That's
go
good.
with
Go ahead.
Ryan,
Go ahead.
and then come back to you.
Go ahead.
Sure, yeah, Mars-Pluto opposition, are we as men going to come into awareness of the deleterious effects that we've had on society collectively for the last 7,000 years and make some appropriate changes or not? Discuss. And a lot of that, or all of that, much of that, percolates up into media, percolates up into politics, percolates up into so many factions of life that, on a personal note here, I'm seeing some kids around here, going into places on the internet that just isn't healthy. And so is that a failure of the masculine? We men don't often like to admit the fact that we fail. That's not in our job description. However, reclaiming, what healthy masculinity is, I think is a discussion that we men have been sampling, and maybe in our conjecture, oh yeah, that needs to happen. But on a more global level, that's obvious and seen, where it's like, oh yeah, maybe we need to work co-creatively with the cycles and rhythms of nature rather than, think we can dominate, extract, and control, Oh, I wonder, so starting to get that through our thick heads in a way that is less destructive, I think is a really good thing. And I think that my personal sense is that we men collectively are just beginning to start to get that through our thick noggins, that, oh yeah, gosh, I wonder if part of the problems of the world is because we're trying to control everything. I want to say that those changes come to a head in oppositions, and you can't really, it's either do or die kind of thing. There's a lot of that popping up in this election cycle. So we'll see what happens. Okay, I'll stop. Anyone else?
Yeah, that's well observed. I mean, it's the opposition with Pluto. I mean, yeah. I mean, the roller coaster is like, it's just going to get faster, isn't it? But that's what we're on. We are on that, and we are becoming aware now. But the problem is when we're aware, because we have been dissociated. I wanted to bring that in. Dissociation is caused by trauma. And once you dissociate, you are basically asleep. All this talk of awakening, well, you could say awakening is actually as becoming conscious. We're becoming conscious that we've been asleep. Under hypnosis. But every shock that we get now is designed to wake us up. That's what we have to realize, that it's not just, oh, isn't that terrible? We have to realize, oh, well, it's been terrible for century after century. We've been conned into thinking this modern day wasn't terrible, and it was terrible in the past. But actually, we're worse than ever, because now we've just developed weapons of mass destruction, and God knows what. We're just better at annihilating each other, and controlling each other, and it's just got worse. So once that hits you, and you realize you haven't been on this upward trajectory of evolution as we've been told we sort of were, then you're traumatized. But then you're awake, because once you realize that, then you think, oh my God, then you've got to take note, and you've got to do something about it. But it's up to every individual to do that. That's the beauty of it. Once every individual realizes that that makes a contribution. So anything each of us does to contributing, not just as astrologers, but anyone who can contribute to that awareness. But the danger is, of course, with Neptune and all the delusion. That's also also the danger is you think you're awake, but are you really awake, or are you just swallowing more delusions? So discernment has to come in. That's where Saturn.
Kimmery,
Yeah, go ahead.
Will you share the election chart again, please?
Sure. Forgive me for bouncing through a little bit, okay? Oh, maybe it will go right to it. Okay, all right. It's not going through it. Hold on, I gotta go through them. Sorry, I don't know why it's not going directly to the current slide, but we'll get there.
There we go. So, I mean, just here's the thought that I have when I tune into this Mars-Pluto. And I think it's sometimes fun and useful to interpret transits as if it was a natal chart. It becomes a little more accessible, right? Like what's the unique evolutionary signature? What's the unique challenge or growth edge for this person, theoretically born on this day, but manifesting, of course, as a collective experience? So, of course, we have that North Node. And I actually appreciate what you just said, Michaela, on Neptune, with this strong emphasis of Neptune, both the Saturn Neptune and the Neptune mutable T-square, with Sag and Gemini involved. I think there can be a lot of incredibly strong investment in, I figured, like, I know the truth, whatever political candidate it might be. And it's funny because we all really think we know the truth, right? Most people will fall into the category of, like, I know it. I know what's right. That space for humility to actually continue to learn, to continue to realize and appreciate the scope of reality beyond one's personal meaning making. And that's why it can be so disillusioning when things don't pan out the way we've been praying or hoping or believing that God's going to make it work, right? Like, we have all these beliefs and ideals wrapped up into things like a presidential election, right? And I think that's meaningful with that North Node Neptune coming together on that Aries Pisces cusp. This is incredibly emphasized. But let's just take a look at this Mars. It's the ruler of the North Node, right? So in an individual chart, okay, well, this is great. It's trying the North Node. This is an evolutionary need to really grow and cultivate your own self-agency, to have confidence, courage, right? It's opposite Pluto. Okay, like, what if I am myself and I stand out, right? I have to be courage. I'm going to be different than everyone else. That's scary. There's that sense of I'm going to be dethroned. I'm going to be humiliated. I'm going to be attacked. I'm going to be different. Like, there needs to be a lot of courage and confidence to trust oneself. But here's the issue relative to the Libra South Node and that call of that Aries North Node and the stress of that Mars. There can be a lot of unexpressed anger, right? You see a chart like this and it's like, oh, you know, if I was meeting a client, I would be tracking how in touch are they with that Mars energy? Because in this chart, that would actually require a whole lot of courage and confidence and self-trust to stand in one's power and not be overly concerned with opposition or threat. Mm-hmm. So there can be a lot of unexpressed, unintegrated anger. And I think in the collective, we can think of this as there can be a whole lot of pride, a strong sense of activism, in giving one's power away to that Leonian figure, right? And that whole Mars in Leo Cancer cusp really speaks to, I need to be seen, I'm important, or my cause is important. And that fundamental sense of Cancer security, I feel at threat. Something fundamental that's essential to my security is being threatened. Like, these are the kinds of very personal points of charge and being activated that can be arising for a lot of people, right? Relative to the Pluto Capricorn Aquarius cusp. Here's the collective trend. Here's where society is going. Here are the groups that I feel alienated from or not alienated from, that I'm a part of, that are against me, that are for me. And what am I going to do about that to protect and preserve my dignity and my respect and my sense of safety? I think for a lot of people, there can be a hyper sense of charge. And let's just take this away from the politics for a moment. Thinking of our own lives, right? Like, what do you do when you think someone's insulting you? Like, what do you do when you feel like someone isn't respecting you or seeing you for who you are, or they're undermining your dignity? These are the moments where we might be most tempted to become victimized. And at the same time, these are the greatest evolutionary thresholds, perhaps, where we can recognize, okay, this is actually pointing to me trusting and believing and seeing myself and not actually projecting the outside as a cause. So those are just some reflections on this. And I think collectively, we can really see how this can be a very charged, sort of personalized feeling for a lot of people.
Absolutely, absolutely. But then that's the point. The individuals are now getting roped up, whereas before we could sort of take a back seat or just did, or thought we had no power to do anything, but didn't take much of an interest. Now people are really seeing that they should have maybe taken an interest for years, and now they better take an interest, because if they don't, but then there is a panic going on with that. It's like, and I want to change, now. And as you say, this aggressiveness and this anger has come up. And feel challenged and got to do something now, instead of actually taking on board the whole picture. So it's very concentrated into those areas. But then that's the transformation, isn't it, with Pluto? I mean, Pluto in Aquarius is not going to be an easy ride. It is a bulldozer. It's a massive celestial bulldozer, as small as it is, that's going to plow through our lives and bring up the shadow. I mean, basically, it's the shadow, isn't it? It's the shadow of the individual and the collective. But when we see that our individual shadow is also reflected in the collective and vice versa, and that this is a whole picture, it's not just our separate countries, our separate individuals, our separate communities. It is the whole we have to start looking at, because that's the Aquarian. And so Pluto is priming us to do that by starting with churning up the individual. As you say, that's what's going to happen.
Let's shift to Daniel.
Yeah, I'm very interested on how Eris plays into what was just said.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen in a second. I just want to respond to what everybody's just said. It's really good. We're talking about metamorphosis through karmic necessity. I mean, that's the bottom line here. And I said this in the last platform. We're part of this. We're individuated. We're spiritualized. We're not in consensus reality. We see things differently than the rest of the people, or 80% of the people on the planet. We have to remember that. We have, but that's only because we have gone through our own metamorphosis, our own crises. I can show you the scars to prove it. So that's what makes the difference. Until we have those personal experiences, and we don't get it. It may happen, our next door neighbor, has cancer, but we're still smoking cigarettes like a chimney. We don't get it until it happens to us. And that's what we have to go through. And that's that's exactly what's happening on a planetary scale. And unfortunately for the United States, given that we're revisiting the Civil War, and 150 years later, that we need to really understand that the past has come back to haunt us, because we've never resolved it. Okay.
Never buried it. Right. It's a zombie.
All right. So all right, I'm going to share my screen here. Got too many windows open, so just bear with me, please.
While you're doing that, Christina made a couple of comments that I think are pretty interesting. When you guys were talking about the slavery backdrop that we have, and she says, yes, a slavery compromise. Not everyone is counted as a whole person. The progressed new moon eclipse, the day the USA Sibley had a progressed new moon in Pisces, and there was an eclipse that day. The day the Francis Scott Key Bridge came down, He was a lifetime slave owner and U.S. Attorney General. His group thought to solve the slavery issue by returning every person of color to Africa, regardless of who or how long they were here.
Oh, God.
And then she goes on, he wrote the lyrics to our national anthem. It is not a stretch to realize that more Americans know these lyrics than all the founding documents combined. When the bridge came down with such significant timing, I read that as this foundation, but slavery makes us rich, so it's okay, can no longer stand.
Hmm.
Pretty powerful, huh?
Yeah, sure is.
Okay, Daniel, take it away.
All right. So just as a preface here, I use a different chart. I don't use Sibley or any of those. I use the chart that was favored by Jim Lewis, the astrocartographer. It's cast for January the 6th, 1775, which is the day that the Journal of Continental Congress passed an act to create a standing army and hired George Washington as the commander-in-chief. I'll abbreviate it here. He said, "In our own native land, in defense of the freedom that is our birthright, we have taken up arms." When a colony declares war against its mother country, it's no longer a colony. It's become a sovereign nation. So this is the chart that I have used, and I have found that it's pretty accurate. I don't want to go through all this. Okay, so this is election day, and I've kind of simplified the chart because we may have viewers who don't know every asteroid and every symbol and whatever. So I try to keep it as simple as possible and just distill it down to what's important. And so what we've got here, first of all, is we've got a skip step here. We've got this is Eris in the U.S. chart, and it is squaring the transiting lunar nodes. So we can see immediately that we've got an issue here of the past, really revisiting us. We are literally reliving the past. The resolution point for this skip step is to look backward and see what happened in 1865. I don't know if any of you have ever lived in the South, have ever ridden through the South, seen the shanties, gone up to Brooklyn, gone to Harlem. What has happened to Black people in our country is a sacrilege, and it's still ongoing. Just because we are open-minded. I grew up in a neighborhood where the Black people were the maids. There's all different kinds of segregation, and Donald Trump loves the expression "Black jobs." I mean, it's still in our consciousness. It hasn't gone away. We're dealing with issues that were never resolved, and if we look at this U.S. chart as well, we will understand that we are going through the same principles, the same things that are unfolding that occurred not only at the American Revolution with the U.S. Pluto return, but at the Civil War as well. They've come back to haunt us. We have never gotten it right, and the experiences that we're having collectively are working towards that. That I work with Eris, and I've studied Eris since 2014. Since 2014, this has happened. And Eris, it's synchronistically, Eris went direct today. I think I put that in the notes. Now, Eris going direct is not like Eris going retrograde. Eris going retrograde really creates some havoc. And the best example that I can give you is 2020 with COVID and 2021 with the Capitol riot. But we had the direct today. When Eris goes direct, she begins to advance her agenda. She creates her agendas at the retrograde. She advances them at the direct station. This is what has happened in our lives since 2015. All of these things have come to pass. We've reached a point where BC has a new word. BC no longer is before Christ. It means before COVID. That's how we look at our world and how it's changed. So, skip through all this. So what's really important is something that I've discovered as I've worked with Eris is what we have been experiencing a a last quarter square from Eris in Capricorn to Pluto in Aries. Excuse me, I got it backwards. From Eris in Aries to Pluto in Capricorn. This particular Eris has a 557-year orbit. Okay. This particular aspect has not occurred since the Axial Age. And I encourage you to look up Axial Age. It's when Homer wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad. It's when the Upanishads were being developed in India. It's quite rare. And it's happening on two levels because the United States is having its Pluto return. Pluto is where it was in 1776, 1775, whatever date you want to choose. Pluto was in Capricorn. Well, it's back again. And Pluto has been squaring, Eris by transit has been squaring not only natal Pluto, but transiting Pluto since 2015. And we're looking at this from 2026 to 2030, there will be 9 exact transits, 9 partile transits of Pluto, of Eris to US Pluto. So all of those things that I just showed you in our history, all were Eris and Pluto. Donald Trump, COVID, all of it. Okay. Well, we haven't even hit the perfection yet. And this election is unbelievably eminently important to what's going to happen. There's no question that because we're only looking 2 years out, so this is going to begin in the midst of the next administration. It's absolutely unavoidable. If we go back to the chart, we can see also that the nodes are in play in 2 different ways, because Eris is trining the north node and sextiling the south node. So we've got it's destiny, it's fate. There are things that are in play that are beyond our beyond our ability to. It's not this isn't mind stuff. These aren't thoughts. This is stuff that's just happening. It's numinous. We're moving through a numinous moment in history. Is the only way that I can describe it. There aren't words to really explain what's happening. And the other aspect that's here that's quite important is this semi square to Jupiter conjunct Uranus in the natal chart. And Jupiter conjunct Uranus is the American spirit. It's the manifest destiny. It was, give me liberty or give me death. The American soul is being tweaked in some way, and we're here, and we chose to be here in this time to work with it. Okay, there's no back door here. There's no exit. We can only face forward and go on. So these are non-negotiable realities. That's really what I want to add. I just want to add that Eris, I see Eris is not just another trans-Neptunian object. When she was discovered, it upset astrology and astrology alike. It just blew them both out of the water. The International Astronomical Union redefined the definition of a planet for the first time since Galileo. Okay, the planet was a wanderer. Okay. So they made up all these rules. Mike Brown and his team, God bless them, who have found all these transnet TNOs, and it really tripled the size of our understanding of the world around us. There's no question. But Eris is a feminine rogue Pluto, and you know how much I value Pluto. So there's a lot embedded in that statement. She's quite intense, and if you look at Eris in your own charts, it'll explain a lot about you. I have moon conjunct Eris. It makes me, erratic. I can't help it. It's just part of who I am, and it's in my 8th house, no less. So
really? Oh my God.
yeah. So, but my 12th house Sun, Saturn, Leo, and Jupiter. It's not Jupiter. Sun, Saturn, and I'm losing my thought here. All my 12th house planets have helped me work through it. So it's This is what I have to say.
That's fascinating. It's
Hey,
fascinating.
Daniel, my comment on the discovery of Eris in Aries was that maybe we could see the rise and return of the matriarchy, not to have dominion over patriarchy, but maybe with the Aquarian age, we might have a balance between matriarchal, patriarchal principles. So that's my chosen thought on Eris.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I agree with you
Kind
100%.
of being challenged now, are they, to claim their animus, I think. You know, as Jung said, the animus and the anima. So a woman has to identify her animus, her masculine, part of the shadow, in fact, but, and part of the Lilith. Interesting, Eris and Lilith have a lot in common. They're sort of rebels, aren't they? But
What we have to be careful of, is the feminine claiming the patriarchal distortions of her animus.
Mhm.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Not, you know,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
that's
exactly.
how women have to be in politics today.
Well, yeah, because it's the system. But as you were
Right.
saying, the system needs changing. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Ryan, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, Eris. This is not universal. It's the way I see it. Pluto was the first discovered of the Kuiper belt, and therefore has rulership over the entire Kuiper belt or any bodies found in there. And if Pluto is the gatekeeper of the Kuiper belt, we can call it the soul, collective unconscious, collective wound, ancient genetic wound. You know, we can call Pluto by many names. Eris, to me, is a piece or a very specific part of that ancient wound, where if Pluto may be a wound that occurred in civilization and how we relate, and when we come together and we form these complex systems and complex relationships, and the manipulation and shadow that can occur and then be passed down through generations. I like to think of Pluto that way. When I think of Eris, I go back further. I go back prior to when we started to, say, have civilization. I start to think of like Homo erectus or Homo habilis, or back there when we're like really in our ancient survival mode and we're just trying to grow and evolve as a species and survive. And then Billy comes and takes my chicken. and then Billy kills me over a chicken. And then my kids have the insanity that can come from there's no justice, there's no balance, there's no way to rectify this. And I carry this chip on my shoulder through generations, and how that percolates up then in our behavior, from megalomania to the rogue shooter, to any individual feeling a sense of disempowerment, injustice, or otherwise ostracization, and there being no means of finding justice for it. What do we do when the king is insane? True or false? The king is insane. And so here we are right now as a people, and we are knowing better. We know that love and light and peace and rock and roll is the way, or whatever. You know, we can all agree on those various forms. It's nice to not hurt other people and things like that, but yet we carry in us this ancient wound of, if I don't somehow react violently to the opposition, then I myself am going to be fodder for the cows, you know. And it's like, and so how do we take our power back? How do we all individually understand that, you know, we're all in this ultimately together, but, you know, how have I been disempowered? And how do I then not react violently or disproportionately to the stimuli based on that ancient wound of somebody's going to take my stuff?
Yeah.
And so here we are now trying to have a greater awareness of this part of us with the discovery of Eris. Wait, I get to go to the party too. Oh, you not letting me in the party? Well, here's a golden apple. Destroy yourselves until you understand the truth. And the truth is that even though my kids went into Pandora's box, I still am a goddess, says Eris. I still get to go to the party. So how have we individually all been disenfranchised or disempowered by an insane king? Well, here we are now, Eris in the US chart, discuss.
Yeah.
Also,
absolutely.
just want to point out, you mentioned, Ryan, earlier, Daniel, you mentioned that Eris is stationing direct. It's actually stationing retrograde today.
God, is it?
So maybe
No,
it is a little more intense than we thought.
no, she
Oh.
goes, she's direct in July and retrograde in January.
No.
I think it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Do I have it
I
backwards?
looked too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just in the last couple of days.
He's stationing retro right now as we speak.
I wouldn't be surprised that
Yeah.
it's been that kind of week. Yes.
Yeah.
Please
He's
retrograde.
stationing at any rate. Very, very
She's definitely stationed.
part of the.
I'm gonna throw it in. I'm gonna throw out another food for thought. I don't know if any of you saw this in the news. Came up last week, but they have, Percival Lowell was searching for Planet X. You probably all know that story, and that's how Pluto was discovered, because there was an aberration in the orbit of some of the outer planets. They have discovered that aberration still exists, and they have think that there's another planet out there that is causing the aberration in the orbit of Neptune. So the story is still being told.
I gotta say something to that, Daniel. I'm a big fan and follower of Walter Cruttendom's work. And he, amongst others, a part of the Binary Star Research Institute, proposed that aberration amongst the trans-Neptunians, so they're all sort of inclined in the same direction, which would imply there's some sort of high gravitational pull that's all kind of leading them to kind of move in that way. The probability is that it's due to a binary star relationship with another star, and something to look into. Barnard's star is likely the most candidate to be our binary star companion. Scientists have found that Barnard's star is actually heading right towards us. If you research it, all of the videos are going to speak about, will Barnard's star crash into our own? No one's yet considering that Barnard's star is moving towards us, which might be a part of a companion system, because that kind of thinking is sort of harder to come across. But it's about 80% of the stars that we know about already have we determined to be a part of a binary star system. So it wouldn't be unlikely. But that would actually answer the question, why are all these outer bodies moving in that way? It maybe isn't another planet. It could be another star that is coming closer and closer to us. And check out Sri Yuktesawar's Holy Science, where he speaks about the Yuga cycles and speaks about our relationship to another star. And for those interested, Walter Cruttendom, it's an amazing body of work that I'm utterly fascinated by.
So let me get this right.
Can you please put the reference in the chat?
Absolutely, happily, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
if
I'll
we
put
live
it
in a
the
binary,
description of the video too. Sorry.
it's okay. If we live in a binary system, does that mean that we all have split personalities?
I don't know.
Of course we do.
So. But it explains perfectly the precession of the equinox and why the observed precession rate's actually increasing.
Yeah.
Right, that our entire solar system is moving through space, and actually as we're approaching that other star, the movement's increasing because of the increased gravitational pull. Yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah.
Ryan, we have anima and animus, and our bodies have a cleft right down the middle. Your tongue.
Yeah. There you go. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that works.
Yeah.
That fits. That fits beautifully. All right, can I throw one other thing in about Eris that I find just fascinating? I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows, but I believe I read somewhere once that Mike Brown first named Eris Xena.
Yes.
After his favorite TV show, Xena, the Warrior Princess. And
Yes.
if we give that mythology to Eris, Xena said, you know, I'm not going to be queen or whatever. I got to go down and fight for the people. I got to get in the people. That's where that's where I can, you know, exact justice. That's where, you know, I can extol the truth. You know, that's where I can make a difference. It's not up here, you know, being the queen or what, because the politics were totally corrupt.
Yeah.
So
It's
Xena.
interesting that what you said about the golden apple, because in psychotherapy, it's called, they call dissociation, they say the golden apple of dissociation. So really interesting that Eris was handing the golden apple of dissociation to the people of Troy, wasn't it? And that would lead them to start an erroneous war, not realizing what they were doing whatsoever because they were dissociated. So
It was the three goddesses, Athena, Pallas,
Yeah.
Athena, Hera, and Juno.
yeah,
Yeah.
Paris chose the goddess.
Yeah, Paris, the son of the king of Troy, was the judge because Zeus didn't want to take it on. He felt he could not be impartial.
It's fabulous. I mean, the myths are wonderful, particularly the Greek myths. They really took on the ancient Egyptian Hermetic.
Except that she is not responsible for the war. That's the whole thing. I've written about
No,
this a
no.
number of times.
No, but she
not
rolled
at
the
all.
apple. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
So-
because she wasn't invited to the wedding. Wouldn't you be upset if everybody in your community went to the wedding and you weren't invited?
It was the hubris of the gods and goddesses. Yeah. They just, it was.
Yeah. It's fabulous, though. It should be mythology should be taught more in schools. I mean, it's ridiculous because they're put down like they're primitive. You know, it's ridiculous, and yet they hold such amazing knowledge. And thank God it's been preserved through astrology. But otherwise, you know, it would be lost because it's full of all this incredible wisdom that we're still plumbing.
When
I just
Troy
wanted
was
to share-
destroyed, Aeneas, who was a Trojan royal, sailed to Italy, and his progenitors founded the city of Rome. I credit Eris with the founding of the Roman Empire.
So something good. Well, no, we didn't.
I want to offer one
Say
reflection on
something
this.
good. But the Empire of Rome wasn't that great.
I'm thinking right now, and this has actually been one of the most helpful learnings for me about Eris because I haven't dropped into it. So a lot of what you shared, Ryan, was actually really helpful for me and kind of, oh, that's what Eris is really about. Eris stationing retrograde, the significance of Mars over this time, this opposition with Pluto. I just wanted to share something that just feels alive and important to speak to in understanding all the strong Aries Mars energy right now. I think in the charge of feeling like there's something to act for, something to defend, it can be very easy to fall into a sort of zealousness where we believe that our cause or how we're choosing to act is the right way. I think that's very emphasized with sort of the subjectivity of that Leo Cancer relative to Capricorn Aquarius. Just sort of being blind to, there are many, you know, there's this teaching, there's a story of when Gandhi almost met Ramana Maharshi. You know, Ramana lived at the same time, but he spent his whole life on a cave, on a mountain.
Yeah.
He wasn't politically involved. Gandhi was very politically involved. Who was right? Well, both, right? Like there's no higher morality or noble cause that you should be interested in. I think the teaching of Mars is we have to burn our karma. We have to find ways of transmuting this energy and responding to the stimulus, but it's all a part of our soul program. We're all meeting the next moment in whatever ways we choose to, but we can't run away from our actual evolutionary program. And if it's not in our program to do a thing, then that will be our, you know, like we're all guided and called to from within to act and respond in the way that is in accordance with our own evolution. I think it's really important to us to respect that and appreciate that, because we have a whole spectrum of people that are, quote unquote, approaching the solution or being active or supporting in the healing. But one person from another, it might look like one person is doing nothing, but actually for them, that is their path, that is their work. And it's just important to appreciate that when you have such strong Mars energy, especially because it's easy to get activated. And I think we have to look inside and ask ourselves, what is my work to do? Like, where am I really, how am I truly called from my own soul to respond to life right now? What's my path?
Exactly. And the
Yeah,
first step is to look at one's shadow, because unless you do, then you are going to be deluded. So you're just going to go, as we were saying, as you just said, we're going to go from one delusion to another. We're going to think we're awake, but actually we've just plummeted into another type of delusion.
Yeah,
And we think
they do that.
we know, but we don't. So that's why the brilliance of the shadow, which Jung took again from the Hermetics, obviously, was in getting in touch with that part, which isn't necessarily bad. It's the part of you that you don't know. It's the part like far out Eris, the far out planets, or Pluto. It's you don't know it, and you don't realize that that is part of your psyche and your makeup. And it can be when you're traumatized. And that's another thing about trauma. It can push you one way or another. It can actually push you into being narcissistic. It can push you into doing things that you wouldn't have believed you were capable of doing because you thought you were a good person. And then you're horrified.
Yeah.
And that's the shadow.
And the group momentum of other people doing the same thing might make it hard to notice that. I just want to tune back in. I know, Kim Marie, you had several charts that you had available. I think it'd be great if you felt inspired to share those. And I know you wanted to share something too, Ryan, but I just wanted to check back in with you, Kim Marie.
Before you do that, we have another comment in the chat from a couple of comments from Christina in the chat. One is that Nancy Pelosi, who is an Aries, has it's conjunct Eris. She's been quietly playing a strong role in getting Biden to step aside for the good of the country. And then she also said that Hakeem Jeffries, her heir to the Democratic leadership of the House, has the male Sun conjunct Pluto version. And she goes on to say it's, or then Deborah says, it's part of the agenda to make people believe the past civilizations were primitive and we're more evolved now. Why Darwin's theory was forced on us. Yeah.
Good comments. I mean, we are so much more aware. Like you were saying, Daniel, about the Civil War, about slavery. I mean, we were segregating it all to the past, but we're seeing now, in what's happened in Palestine, for instance, we're seeing that the colonialism never died, and and actually our countries, Britain, France, Europe, America, have been the new Roman Empire. And so it is the empire still. And it's still colonial. And there we were pretending, well, certain parts of our society, the powers that be, were pretending that, oh no, that's all gone. But it hasn't gone. And it's now so much in our faces that we are absolutely stunned because we can't believe that it's been under our noses all this time. And we haven't realized it, what we were doing, what we were thinking. And that is stunning. So we have to be gentle on ourselves and realize that we are going to be stunned by these. Well, I think the charts there of Israel, that would be interesting if could put that up, Sue.
Michaela, let's give chance for Kim Marie to share some of the charts she's prepared on.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Also, first, was there something you wanted to speak to, Ryan?
Well, yes, not to derail what Kim's going to say in any way. Maybe it's a lead into what Kim has to say. But Ari, some of the things you said in closing, and then Michaela, some of the things you said in support, I just wrote down some quick non sequiturs. Look at one's life path at the point that you don't know, we can't believe, we got to be gentle on ourselves. Let's keep in mind that Neptune is in a pretty intense place right now, retrograding at the end of Pisces. And Neptune moving into Aries next year, that's going to be a very interesting conversation that we could have. And so I want to throw out what we've been talking about, Eris intensity and Mars and Pluto and, bringing the Uranian trauma, no problem. But amidst all of this, and here comes Sun Kazemi Neptune speaking, but amidst all of this is this knowing, I'd like to assume or project Neptune, assume or project on all of us that we may be feeling this, like, we know that there's something greater for us humans. We know that we're capable of so much. We know that we are here, from some points of view to make this earth into a beautiful garden. That's why we're here. We're co-creators of this realm, not dominators. Wow, we could co-create something really amazing. Well, welcome to Neptune retrograde through Pisces, where I'd like to believe that an undercurrent amidst all of this intensity and change and chaos and darkness and megalomania, that there's something that's beginning to sprout in us collectively, and that is that we may all be starting to get it, that there's other ways to do it than this war and violence stuff. And 1967, whatever, but here we are now. What can we actually do tangibly? What action can we take to anchor this vision into reality? I would love to say that Neptune's sojourn through Eris will inspire us to take concerted action, as to really moving forward in ways that could actually work. The spiritual pioneer find ways that can actually work, and not just like, oh, I can't wait for the next president because they're obviously going to fix all of our problems.
That has to go. Yeah, you're right.
Discuss.
But that's absolutely true. I mean, but Neptune in Pisces is about the unconscious. It's about the deep dive, but it's about seeing that there isn't, because the unconscious has been misused. The ancient knowledge, in fact, of the unconscious has been misused. We are not aware that actually you have to make a choice. Once you realize that your unconscious is at the mercy of outside influences, traumatic experiences, events, then you realize also the flip side of that you have a choice to make. And this thinking positively is not just then about, bypassing, spiritual bypassing, and saying, no, you think everything positive and that's going to make everything lovely. It's something else. It's saying, no, you acknowledge that it is not lovely. And there is a definitely unlovely side to yourself and everything else in the world. But you have a choice to make, and you can turn it. You can flip it to the positive. You can envisage, which is Neptune, a better solution, a better world, as you were saying, build an Eden. And you can use the power of your mind then to do that, which is what Jung said, rather than be at the mercy of all these dark influences that are pulling you down and have been used by the powers to do it. So we have that choice to make. So we are not disempowered, but first we have to confront the dark and the shadow, and then realize, okay, what are we going to do about this? Make a choice, because Neptune will then be on your side. Yeah, good point.
It works for those evolutionary states of consciousness that are really trying to search and understand. But one of the things that Jeffrey Green, evolutionary astrology, would always state is that there's two types of evolution. There is the Darwinian, uniform, day by day, and there's cataclysmic evolution. And even when we have cataclysmic evolution, we're not guaranteed to evolve, because the past, no matter how dysfunctional it is, represents security. And the future, no matter how much we may want it, is insecure. So it takes a lot of courage to really move forward. And through the observation correlation paradigm, as Daniel was saying earlier, there's about, 70% of us that would rather put our head in the sand. And when we go through cataclysms, we would rather go back to yesterday for its security, no matter how dysfunctional it is. So we need that Pluto and Aquarius cataclysm to really shake things up on the planet. And one of the things that I've been speaking about for about the last year is we have Pluto moving into Aquarius 23-24. we have Uranus moving in, or Neptune moving into Aries in 25. We have Uranus moving into Gemini in 25, and we have Chiron moving into Taurus in 26. So if you want to include Chiron with the planets, you know, we more or less, sorry, not skipping Eris, okay? But we have these 4 outer planets that we're so familiar with that are changing signs, 4 of them changing signs in 4 years. That alone is just going to shake up our collective consciousness, our individuated consciousness. And so it's going to be some chaos. It's not just Pluto in Capricorn. It's all these outer planets changing signs that are just going to change the vibrations. And so it will be up to that 3 out of 10 souls on the planet who are really searching and trying to break free and evolve. It will be up to us really helping out those who are feeling very insecure and want to cling to that past to look at things differently. I expect a lot more cataclysmic stuff to happen in this decade. I think we're just getting started. So anyway, just a little 2 cents there. I always prepared too many charts, sorry. But because of what happened today, I'm like, oh, maybe we should put Kamala up. And again, I'm using when the polls close. Yeah, so maybe we can do a few comments. And I'm just going to say one tidbit because there's so much to say on this chart. Kamala is not the only person who was born in the mid 60s, okay? But astrologers know that we had the 3 Uranus-Pluto conjunctions in 1965, and we all know all the phrases that were, you know, created during the 1960s and all its turbulence. And I thought the other day, Pluto moving into Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus, that could be a lot like a Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And so if you can make just that little analogy or synastry there, we can, you know, recognize that just with Pluto in Aquarius, this decade might be as exciting as the Pluto Uranus conjunctions in the 1960s. And so even though Kamala has that in that little, you know, I need to be secure 4th house is still a power punch, no matter which one of the 12 houses it was in. And there it is with Venus and, you know, the Chiron opposition. And all of a sudden she is now thrust into the public eye. So look at the transits going on election day for her. You know, Ari, you can probably relate to the Mars synastry that's going on. And I also see the Jupiter retrograde with that Gemini rising again, too, that we have. Anybody else? Initial comments? And by the way, I would love an open primary with the Democratic convention and really see democracy in action. But I don't know how feasible it is from political, legal, financial, who knows? Stay tuned. We're going to have lots going on over the next month.
Yeah. I've been wondering if there will be a primary. Well, you know, it's interesting. So Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, and also Donald Trump's running mate, they all have the South Node in Sag.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what I note here, what feels most significant is, you know, Uranus will be stationing direct on close to her Jupiter, but not quite on her Jupiter. And this Jupiter isn't quite going to reach her. When I first looked at it, I'm like, oh, cool, it's crossing, but I actually realized it's not going to cross her 1st house until after inauguration. So the election day and inauguration as well, Jupiter will still be in the 12th. It'll be completing its square with Saturn, with Neptune, with their own natal Chiron, which is, you know, 10th house is like the house of being the president. So I find that, yeah, the Saturn on her Chiron in the 10th, with Jupiter approaching a stationing in a tight square to both that Chiron and Saturn, to me, that feels the most significant in terms of a significant phase in our own soul journey. I don't have any insights, but that's highlighted in her chart for sure.
Ari
Question,
had,
Ari. What degree is JD Vance's South Node in Sag?
I'll tell you in a moment.
Okay, because Kamala is not going to have the Jupiter retrograde over her nodal axis 3 times, but Donald Trump is going to.
Right. Let's find out.
Ari,
Anybody
how
in
do
the
you
chat?
see notes on her ICMC?
What's
It's
that?
4 degrees Sagittarius. Do you, I have this chart.
North node on her MC.
Wow.
Oh yeah, 4 degrees. Yeah, he's 4 degrees Gemini Sag. The transiting North node on her MC. The transiting North node is not on her MC. That's her 11th house cusp.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I
it's
forget.
just gone into her 10th
Oh,
house,
yeah,
so,
yeah.
but it's.
But I mean, but still, Daniel, that I mean, the 10th house is super emphasized right now.
Right.
Saturn just entered there, right? And we're having this whole Saturn Neptune coalescence happening in the 10th. The North node joining, like all of the evolutionary activity is pointing to that 10th house for her.
I mean,
So that's interesting.
the retrograde, I was thinking of it going back towards the applying back. It's going back towards her moon, squaring her moon in Aries, and so it
But
doesn't go
Oh, just
direct
square.
at the end of November, does it?
What's going back towards her moon?
Well, it's Pluto.
Oh yeah,
I think of
not
Pluto
gonna
when
quite
it's
get there though.
retrograde. It's going back towards that. It's applying.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's direct now. It's gonna go into Aquarius and never go back into Capricorn.
I thought it doesn't it. Oh, doesn't it go?
Nope.
This is the
Does it-
day of the election. By then it
By
will
the
be.
end of this year, we're done with
By
Pluto.
then,
in
you mean,
Capricorn,
yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah, by then, yeah. But it's at the end of November, doesn't it go direct then? Am I
Yeah.
wrong?
It goes
in
direct.
back into Aquarius,
Yeah, exactly.
the end of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's when
The
it
end
goes
of
back.
November, yeah.
Yeah.
But so
So
yeah,
when-
Kimberly,
oh,
JD
yeah,
Vance isn't
October,
getting that
October
Jupiter either.
12th.
JD Vance is too early, and then Kamala Harris is too late.
Yeah.
Neither of them are getting that Jupiter.
Exactly.
Yeah, and here, I think I've got this one, just to give
Donald
us
Trump
a quick
is.
little look. See, here's Jupiter going over Trump's Uranus North Node, opposing South Node Moon. He'll get all of those 3 times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Mhm. The other
Lot of
thing that I
Jupiter.
thought was so interesting, though, to just touch on, this was true for Trump and Biden, although it was closer for Donald Trump, was the nodal axis over his Eris Neptune opposition squared from the moon in Capricorn. And again, this is the poles closing, and the moon is always the public sentiment in mundane astrology. It's the collective mood of the public. And I thought that this moon in early Capricorn, square his natal stuff, square the transiting nodes, put a little emphasis on Trump that people may turn against him as we get closer and closer to the election. And whereas with Kamala, I'm not seeing any tight aspects from that moon square.
I just don't think she's going to get the Candice to
Yeah,
see. I don't
there can be a lot that's going to happen here
A lot between now and then.
not just the Democratic Party. So stay tuned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if
Tim
indeed
Marie,
she is the nominee, it may also depend on who her running mate is.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't seem to always, change the temperature, but I think
In
that
this situation, because it's been so dramatic, such a turnaround, it is possible that the VP candidate can make such a difference, because we're going to have 2 people who are so new. And I said on the pre-call, I gotta give credit to my husband. He said if she is the nominee and she's smart, she would pick Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, because he would counteract so many things that just happened with Donald Trump's assassination attempt, with coming from a battleground state, with just his own personal story of how he stood by his wife with her own assassination attempt, etc. I've not looked up his chart, so I don't know anything about it, but just kind of tossing that one out there.
And he was in the military and he was an astronaut.
True. Yep. Yep.
That
True.
would go down well.
Does anybody see anything in Donald Trump's chart that questions the veracity of the shooting?
In
Uh,
in my
I-
opinion, Donald Trump's chart as a whole questions my personal opinion and perspective on this soul is he's fueled by, and I'm just owning this as my own personal human opinion, he's fueled by a sort of black magic that is incomprehensible to most of us.
I agree with you.
Whether it was set up, whether it's there's something behind the scenes that's a part of this, but of course it's not the ultimate power. But Jeff Green talked a lot about that souls that have that are operating on that level, they have this sort of uncanny ability to survive and persevere, and it's true if you look historically at other such figures.
He's the disruptor. I mean, that is his whole purpose in the big scheme of things, is to disrupt everything.
Well, before the insurrection.
If you were shot by an AK-47 and grazed your ear, you wouldn't be looking for your shoes, you'd be looking for your ear.
Yes, it's true. But I mean, maybe he has some divine or not so divine protection. And he does seem fated. I mean,
he's Teflon. He has
Teflon.
Right now he's got a progressed Venus-Jupiter conjunction in his second house. He's protected from everything.
Well, I think
it's interesting you refer to him as Teflon, because the last president that was referred to as Teflon was
Reagan.
And Reagan, the other president that the Heritage Foundation is behind.
He's making me believe in the Antichrist.
Oh yeah,
that's interesting. You said that. I just, if I could quickly read this bit, I read this out before the election of in 2020, and about him not winning, but it's Nostradamus said this, and I linked it up with Trump, but it said about this Reb Ruberont, he calls him, who proves to be, or perhaps she, will bring all America and the world into difficulties. The word melee, conflict, scramble, or scrum, in the light of these considerations, the last couplet may mean they will call back again as a leader, one who is so false and antichrist that he will put them all together in a conflict. So maybe he was right about that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
I want to say something about Donald Trump's chart, just from the perspective of health and wellness astrology. Before the debate, the news was starting to pick up a little more and more about how the strange things he was saying at his rallies, and how he would have his mental wandering. And I'm not going to remember the name of the psychiatrist who said, I'm not going to remember his name. He's out there in the social media a lot, but he said Donald Trump has a dementing brain. Biden has an aging brain. Well, I think he was maybe proven a little bit right. I've always been thinking that when Jupiter goes retrograde, and we haven't even had Jupiter make the first passages over this Uranus moon nodal axis yet. And so Donald Trump has had this little wave with Jupiter and Gemini of riding high. But as he gets that first passage, and then this second retrograde passage, which is going to come, a month before the election, and as this shakeup with the Democratic Party has happened, I'm wondering if Donald Trump may not fracture even more, because Uranus rules literally the brain in evolutionary astrology. And in Gemini, one moment you're there, and in the next moment you're not there. So what we saw happen with Joe Biden could happen with Donald Trump as well, especially the pressure he will be under as the spotlight is taken off of him. And if there's any shift in polls that show him losing his majority, then all his legal fears come back to haunt him, his financial fears come back to haunt him, and that's going to create a lot of stress and pressure for him. And again, I've always thought that before election day, we would possibly see Donald Trump fracturing mentally.
How about when
Thoughts?
Jupiter goes over his Uranus?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
And
really
then the moon, the pressure, the pressure from the moon, you know, because the moon rules all the fluids in the body.
Yeah.
And what is high blood pressure? You know, it's the fluids in your heart or your brain. It could be one or the other. Okay. They're just really not working very well. And if that, you know,
Well,
pressure
wishful
builds up,
thinking.
that needs a release valve somewhere.
I
It's
don't
a really
know.
interesting point, Kimmery. I'm also looking at his Uranus stationing after the election, really close to his midheaven. In that square to Mars as well. It's almost like that something has to break, and we can't say what it is, but that stationing on the midheaven and then moving direct there, it's like there's some sort of shift, some sort of breaking. And yeah, Uranus corresponds to the physiology of the brain. And then 10th house being literally our structural reality and literally the presidency and literally the normalcy that we're trying to uphold in life, the status quo. It's interesting because that actually makes me consider whatever he's trying to stabilize, that Uranus Taurus on the midheaven stationing, I think will be another important turning point. Uranus stationing retrograde, by the way, which we'll do soon. I'm just mentioning this because it wasn't spoken. Biden's sun is at 27 degrees Scorpio in his 12th house. And so this is all happening with Uranus in the 6th house, health, right? It's sort of a humbling, like that Scorpio sun in the 12th. There's like a humility in this loss of power. I'm not all powerful. I'm not, immortal. There's something about that Uranus sort of just humbling the soul to acknowledge his own limitations. So Uranus is playing a really big role here, it seems.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump not only has transiting Uranus square that Mars, as you can see right here, okay, he also has transiting Uranus last quarter square, or transiting Saturn, excuse me, last quarter square natal Uranus 3 times as well.
Interesting.
So he has Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus all hitting his natal Uranus. So it emphasizes a little bit more of what I was saying of brain fracturing, and whether it's just something mental or whether it turns out to be, the stroke, and Uranus opposite Sun, Aquarius, Leo, it can be the stroke or the heart. Who knows? Maybe that 12th house Pluto, by the grace of God, moves through it all. But these are some pretty heavy aspects for him to go through. And if I don't know if you noticed this one, but exact on election day, his solar arc Saturn in early Libra is going to make a first quarter square to Mercury in Cancer. So again, it can be more of that fluid buildup. Okay, it can be more of the Libra split or fracturing that can go on, and Mercury ruling that left brain. Stay tuned. I mean, I think, again, I'm repeating myself, but Donald's been riding a little bit of a wave, but none of these aspects have really quite come into play yet, with the exception of solar arc Saturn.
I want to hear what you got to say. I want to share this one thought on that. We often maybe prematurely equate Jupiter with just expansion and luck and whatever, but more objectively speaking, Jupiter is simply going to highlight things and make it evident. So for this soul, this could easily be, right now there's a wave of growth, popularity, which is true. He's going massively up in the polls, I think. But Jupiter very, very often is something being taken away. And I think with 3 hits over the North Node Uranus, that's such a highlighted signature. And I really like your point, Kimmery, with that Saturn square to Uranus. Jupiter is going to exaggerate and highlight something that is unavoidable. That we can say one way or another.
Yeah, I always say Jupiter can't expand into something till you open up the space for it. And that's what can bring that Jupiterian loss.
This is all conjecture. But if I apply the delineating the South Node story technique with this here guy, I could imagine that whatever he was promised in his glory and his power was given to him by those who may have wanted to use him. And so hey, sure, I'll take that. I'll get everything I want, all the time. I could see how that could be attractive for a soul. But I'm wondering, I just want to devilly advocate here for, the broad spectrum of possibilities in this universe. What if this individual had a mass, huge, sudden awakening and said, hey, look, it's all rigged. Hey, this is how it's all rigged. This is how I was rigged. This is how you guys are all rigged. It's all a sham.
Of course it's rigged. The whole thing's rigged.
I mean, what
His
would
followers
happen?
wouldn't even believe it.
Universe by the universal mind.
What would happen though if he stood up and said, hey, how 5 years or whatever on The Apprentice, I was just practicing my acting because they wanted me to. I mean, what would happen? I don't know, of course, but I see a chart like this, and I wonder if there is a spilling the beans here, or an opportunity, an opportunity to bring things to awareness.
Think back to just for reflection purposes, think back to when he came out in 15, elected in 2016, he was going through it, and I think it was 2018, 19, 21, 22. There was like a 4 or 5 year time period where Pluto and Pisces was squaring all these Gemini Sag planets, and Neptune was transiting his 7th house. This was the time period when people either saw him as their cult leader or messiah, or people were horrified that you could believe him when he was, physically saying that the sky is polka dots, not blue. And so that was the first time that he ran for presidency. As we were just saying here right now, there's different transits going on. People now know who he is. They kind of know what he's working with. And so I think that these Saturn, Uranus, Jupiter transits to his chart are going to be a little bit of a different story to his Gemini Sag axis this time, and especially as we go through the next few months.
I think that Jupiter, though, conjunct his sun. I mean, sun node. North Node. It's just in the bag, frankly.
What was your quote on Jupiter? I loved what you said. I wanted to hear it again.
Michaela, Jupiter does not get to his sun before the election.
Well,
No.
I mean, it's applying, isn't it? It's applying.
It doesn't even get to his North Node before the election.
Oh, it just stations before.
Oh, that's
backs
right.
off.
I'm wrong there, aren't I? Yep.
But it is applying.
Yeah.
So it's within orb.
Yes, it's within a degree of his North Node.
No, it is. Yeah, it's applying.
Jupiter goes over the nodal axis 3 times, Sue.
Yeah,
Jupiter
right.
goes
Yeah, I'm sorry,
retrograde
but yes.
2120.
But I guess my point is that Jupiter's moving away from his North Node on the day of the election. It's
towards his sun. Yeah.
Towards his Uranus.
Towards Uranus, because Jupiter will be retrograde. So Ari, my little quote is in order for Jupiter to expand, the space must be made. And I say it different ways, but it's another way of saying, everybody always goes Jupiter, expand, expand, expand. Well, you've got to create the space or the energy for it. So that's where the loss can come in.
That's the natural ruler of the historic ruler of the 12th house.
How about the perspective that not all of his supporters are watching Fox News, that there is a large percentage of the American population that is totally disenfranchised, and they don't care, what he says. They're just looking for a way to vent their anger
Oh, totally.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with you, Daniel.
I see it.
To me, it's really worth looking at RFK Jr.'s chart. He's already double digits in many polls, and I think we shouldn't. My intuition is his popularity is much greater than the polling might even suggest, because there are so many people that are just disenfranchised from the two-party system. And I think he's drawing a lot from both sides more than people are comfortable admitting publicly. And I haven't really looked at his chart much, but that's worth taking a look into as well, because he's a major player in this.
Maybe we can do an update, a further. I think this will require an election panel.
Well, everyone come to the EA conference, because whatever happens between now and October, Kim Ree's giving a whole talk on the politics of the US elections, and it's going to be very fascinating by then for sure.
Yes, it will be changing on the daily.
Yeah. We'll see who the main players are then.
Really? Well, do we have any wrap up? Anything else that we need to talk about, or
Oh
As
yeah,
far
I
as
just
that-
The other,
I gotta
that's
head
all
out
the
myself,
other
I too,
aspects
for
going
sure.
on that we never even looked at. But today's news just kind of overrode everything.
yeah,
there was
Sue, if you wanted to, what you could do, Sue, is there's still some fascinating aspects going on this second half of the year with the Jupiter first quarter squares to Saturn, with Saturn semi squares to Pluto, and the eclipses and the Mercury retrograde. So there was, there's more forecasting aspects we could look at if we wanted to do a subject other than the election.
Jupiter
Yeah,
sets
let's
the
do
quadrant to
another meeting.
Pluto too.
We can do another meeting. If everybody wants to just post the dates that they're available to do so if they want to, then I'll try to put it all together.
Yeah, Israel's chart should be looked at sometime too, because Trump's progressions really do pick it up. And of course, Netanyahu is the if there's an antichrist, it's Netanyahu. He's not, he's no servant to Israel. He's like Hitler was to Germany. He's bad news, frankly. But anyway,
He's
but
supposed to be addressing both all of Congress this week, Michaela.
yeah.
I'm wondering if he's going to skip Biden now and just go straight to Congress.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But interestingly, Donald Trump is no fan of Netanyahu, because he sort of took the pee out of him at some point. And although he is to Israel, of course. So that should be interesting, because they could go at loggerheads. But there's very much a focus if Trump does get in, of him and Israel and Netanyahu's chart. And the way that builds up during the year looks really, really intense. And that's going to be a focal point, I think, for the world, because it's live. In fact, just tonight on the news, they were saying that Israel, for the first time, has actually, Netanyahu's government has attacked the Houthis. So there's fear that that's going to start expanding the whole thing, which has been the fear all along, into the rest of the Middle East. And once that happens, it's a powder keg. So it's like it's dynamite. And so as this election is going on, you've got Netanyahu. As I say, I think he's a bigger threat than Trump. It depends how Trump handles him, but wow. Should be interesting.
Sounds like this could be a good another topic that we can delve into.
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds like way too much for
Yeah.
where we are now, and we've already gone 2 hours. So
Yes, this has been really fun. Great to be with you all.
Great.
Thank you, Sue and Robin, for putting this together.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thanks,
see you in the
everyone.
next one in the near future, shall we say.
As soon as everyone's ready.
Pleasure seeing
Namaste,
you all.
everyone.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
good care.
Bye.